Zanele was a 29-year-old schoolteacher from Mbale, full of love and trust. She had been dating Saifo, a charming businessman who was always travelling for what he called meetings. They had been together for 2 years, and on their anniversary, she decided to do something special. She cooked his favourite food, packed it with care, and wrapped a small gift with a handwritten note. She booked a bus to Arusha, Tanzania, where Saifo said he'd be staying. The long trip didn't bother her. She was excited. In the taxi to the hotel, she smiled to herself, imagining his surprise when he opened the door and saw her standing there, holding his favourite food. Her heart raced with joy. She walked into the hotel, asked for his room number, and took the elevator up to room 214. She stood in front of the door, fixed her hair, and knocked gently. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. A bit confused but still hopeful, she asked a cleaner nearby to open the door, pretending to be his wife. The door opened slowly, and that's when everything changed. Her smile vanished. Her heart dropped. What she saw inside that room shattered everything she believed. Zanele stood outside room 214, heart beating fast, gift bag in one hand, warm food in the other. She had knocked twice already, but there was no sound from inside. Maybe he was sleeping, or in the bathroom, she thought. Still smiling, still hopeful, she waited for a moment, then turned to a housekeeping lady who was nearby cleaning another room. Zanele walked up to her politely and said, "Excuse me, I'm his wife. I came all the way from Uganda to surprise him. He must be inside sleeping or maybe forgot his phone. Can you please open the door?" The woman looked unsure. She hesitated, looked Zanele up and down, and then slowly nodded. Zanele looked so kind, so genuine. What harm could it do? With a small keycard swipe, the door clicked open. It swung halfway, and Zanele's world stopped. She didn't walk in. She didn't even breathe. Her eyes locked on the bed just a few feet away. There was Saifo, shirtless, relaxed, completely at home. But he wasn't alone. He was lying there, holding hands with another woman. A baby was sleeping beside them. The woman looked up, clearly startled, and slowly sat up, pulling a thin bedsheet around herself. Zanele just stood there, frozen. Her body was still, but inside her, everything was breaking. She didn't scream. She didn't drop anything. She just stared. She couldn't move. The homemade food in her hand was still warm, the note still tucked under the ribbon of the gift bag. For a second, it felt like maybe she was dreaming. Maybe she had walked into the wrong room. Maybe it wasn't real. But Saifo's eyes widened when he saw her. He sat up, confused, then annoyed. Not guilty, not sorry, just irritated, like she had ruined something. The woman on the bed looked between them and asked Saifo, "Is that your wife?" There was a silence, heavy and sharp. Saifo didn't look at Zanele. He looked at the woman next to him and said with a cold shrug, "No, that's just a side thing from Uganda. She doesn't matter." Those words didn't just hurt, they destroyed her. Her chest tightened, her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. For 2 years, she had trusted him, believed his sweet messages, his promises, his phone calls from meetings. She had waited for him during his long trips. She had turned down other men. She had dreamed of a future with him. And now she was being called just a side thing, something that didn't matter. The cleaner was still standing near the door, now staring at the floor in discomfort. Zanele blinked slowly, took a step back, and without saying a single word, turned around. She walked away calmly. Not a tear fell. Not yet. She didn't scream, didn't fight, didn't throw anything. She didn't give Saifo or the woman the drama they might have expected. She took the elevator down, walked outside the hotel, and kept walking until she found a quiet bench nearby. She sat there. Finally, her hands began to shake, but still, she didn't cry. In her mind, the scene kept replaying. Saifo, shirtless, relaxed, with another woman and a baby. A baby. He had a whole life, a hidden life, one that never included her, not even for a second, and she had no idea. The pain was deep, yes, but deeper than pain was shame. She felt fooled like a joke, but more than that, she felt something else, something sharp, something rising inside her. It wasn't sadness, It was a kind of fire. She pulled out her phone. Her hands were still trembling, but she opened her camera app. She had left the hotel too quickly to record anything inside, but she had footage from earlier. Her walking into the lobby, holding the food, asking the receptionist for room 214. She had filmed herself giggling in the taxi, saying, "I'm surprising my man." She looked at those videos now and felt a strange ache in her chest. That happy girl in the video, she didn't know what was coming, but now she did. Zanele knew she couldn't just let this go, not because of revenge, but because she had to take back her story. She wasn't just going to be a woman who got cheated on and walked away quietly. No, she had a voice, and she was going to use it. Her silence in that room wasn't weakness. It was strength. It was control. And now she was going to speak, but on her own terms, on her own platform. Not to Saipho, not for Saipho, for herself, for every woman who had ever been lied to and made to feel small. The door to room 214 should have stayed closed, but maybe it opened just in time, because what Zanele saw inside didn't just break her, it woke her up. And sometimes, when life smashes you to the floor, you realize that's exactly where you needed to be, so you can rise stronger than ever before. Zanele stood at the doorway, frozen, unable to move or speak. Her heart was pounding so loud it felt like the only sound in the world. Saipho was still holding the other woman's hand, the baby resting peacefully beside them. It didn't look like a mistake. It didn't look like a moment. It looked like a life, one he had built while lying to her. Still, she waited. Maybe he would say something, anything that made sense. Maybe there was an explanation, however painful. But what happened next crushed every last piece of hope in her chest. The woman on the bed looked straight at her and asked, without even a hint of worry, "Is that your wife?" It was a simple question, one that should have had a simple answer. But Saipho didn't hesitate. He didn't flinch. His voice was calm, cold, and cruel as he replied, "No, that's just a side thing from Uganda. She doesn't matter." Those words cut deeper than a knife. Zanele felt them hit her like a slap to the soul. She doesn't matter. That sentence echoed in her head, louder than anything else. 2 years of love, 2 years of texts, calls, gifts, and long-distance tears. 2 years of believing in him, waiting for him, praying for his safe travels. And now she was just a side thing, nothing, worthless. She couldn't speak. Her lips opened slightly, but no words came out. Her throat was tight, her heart sinking like a stone in her chest. Her hands began to shake, and the bag of food she had lovingly prepared slipped from her fingers and dropped to the floor. The small gift she had wrapped with so much care now looked like a joke. She didn't even look at Saipho again. She just turned around and walked away. No shouting, no crying, no fighting, just silence. But that silence wasn't weakness. It wasn't giving up. It was power. Zanele knew that anything she said in that moment would give him her energy, and he didn't deserve it. She refused to give him a scene to remember. She refused to let him see her break. Instead, she gave him the most dangerous answer of all. Nothing. That silence was her strategy, because she knew something Saipho didn't. She still had her voice, and she would use it, just not there, not for him. She would rise from this. She didn't know how just yet, but deep down, a new fire had been lit inside her. What he said may have shattered her heart, but it also woke her up. She wasn't just going to disappear. She wasn't just a broken girl from Uganda. She was Zanele, and this was not the end of her story. It was the beginning. Back in Mbale, Zanele sat alone in her small apartment. The hurt was still fresh, but she refused to let it bury her. Her mind kept going back to that moment in the hotel, the door opening, the other woman, the baby, and those cruel words, "She doesn't matter." It replayed in her head like a nightmare she couldn't switch off. But instead of drowning in pain, she opened her phone and went straight to her gallery. She had recorded small clips during the trip, her smiling in the taxi, the hotel hallway, her walking up to room 214. She had even captured a few seconds of the moment the door opened, enough to show Saipho on the bed, shirtless and surprised. It wasn't much, but it was real. She opened a video editing app and began to put the clips together. She added soft background music and wrote short captions like, "I travelled to surprise him on our anniversary, room 214 Arusha, and finally, this is what I found." Her hands were steady now. Her face was calm. She didn't post it for revenge. She posted it for every woman who had ever been lied to, cheated on, or made to feel small. She didn't want sympathy. She wanted the truth to be seen. She uploaded the video anonymously with one simple title, "When You're the Backup Plan." Within hours, it started spreading. First a few likes, then hundreds, then thousands. People began sharing it on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere. Within 24 hours, it had over 1 million views. Within 48, it had passed 2 million. Women across East Africa, from Nairobi to Kigali, from Kampala to Lagos, filled the comments with support. Some cried, some raged. Most said the same thing. "We've all been Zanele." It was like she had opened a door not just for herself, but for millions of others. She was no longer alone in her pain. She was a voice for many. People wanted to know who the mystery woman in the video was, but Zanele stayed quiet. She watched it all from the background, knowing her silence had already said enough. But Saipho couldn't hide. People recognized him, his face, his voice, even the hotel room details. Everything became public. Within days, his company released a statement saying he was suspended. His business partners pulled out of deals. His polished image as a family man and professional shattered overnight. Zanele didn't smile at his downfall, but she felt something powerful. Peace, justice. She hadn't yelled, cursed, or fought. She had simply told the truth, and the truth had done the rest. In a world where women are told to keep quiet and move on, Zanele had done something brave. She had spoken up in the most silent but strongest way, and the world listened. Zanele could have disappeared. After everything, no one would have blamed her if she had just stayed silent, deleted her social media, and tried to forget. The pain was still sharp, and some nights, the memory of that hotel room hit her like a wave. But something inside her had changed. She wasn't the same Zanele who had packed food with love and taken a long trip to surprise a man who didn't deserve her. That version of her had been broken, yes, but not destroyed. The silence she had chosen in that hotel room wasn't weakness, it was power. And now she was ready to use her voice in a new way. She started small. Sitting on the floor of her bedroom, she opened her phone and began recording her voice. No fancy studio, no microphone, just truth. She spoke softly but clearly, sharing her story. Not just about Saipho, but about what it felt like to be lied to believe in someone completely, and to be told you don't matter. She called her podcast Through the Door, a name that held deep meaning, because everything changed the moment she walked through that hotel door. It broke her, yes, but it also woke her up, and now she wanted to create a space for other women who had walked through their own painful doors, betrayal, heartbreak, lies, and came out stronger. At first, only the few people listened, but with each episode, more women began to tune in. Zanele didn't preach or act like a victim. She simply told real stories, sometimes her own, sometimes stories sent in by women across the continent. Women who had kept quiet for years suddenly had a voice. They emailed her, sent messages. Some even called in to share how they found their strength after being left, cheated on, or forgotten. It became a safe space for them, and her quiet voice reached far beyond Mbali. Soon, invitations started coming. A small women's group in Nairobi asked her to speak. She agreed, nervous but excited. She stood in front of 50 women that day, sharing her journey with a soft but steady voice. When she finished, they stood and clapped, not just because of her story, but because they saw themselves in her. She wasn't a celebrity. She was one of them, a woman who had been hurt, but chose not to stay broken. After that, everything grew. Podcasts invited her to speak. Universities reached out for workshops. A women's rights organization in Lagos flew her in for their conference. One of her episodes went viral again, and brands started to notice. A local skincare brand partnered with her for a campaign about self-love. Then a publishing company offered her a book deal. Zanele, the teacher from Mbale who once cried in silence, was now a voice for thousands. What Saipho tried to break, the world lifted up. He had looked at her and said, "She doesn't matter." But now she mattered more than ever, not just to herself, but to every woman who had ever been made to feel small. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to prove anything to him. Her life, her peace, her power, that was the proof. Zanele kept her podcast real. She didn't pretend to be fully healed. She still had bad days. Sometimes she still questioned why it all happened, but she always ended her episodes with the same words. Even if someone broke you, that's not where your story ends. You get to choose what happens next. And people listened, not just women, men too. Some wrote in to say her podcast helped them understand the pain they'd caused. Some apologized to women they had hurt. Her story was no longer just a story. It had become a mirror, a lesson, a movement. Zanele's face began to appear on posters, flyers, and magazine covers. She didn't ask for fame. She only wanted healing. But somehow, by being honest about her pain, she gave others the courage to face their own. And that made her shine even more. Sometimes, late at night, she'd remember room 214. Not with tears anymore, but with quiet strength. That room didn't break her. It built her. It was the start of everything. And in a strange, twisted way, she was even grateful. Not to Saipho, never to him, but to the moment that showed her the truth. Because the moment the door opened and her heart shattered, a new door opened too, one that led her to purpose, power, and a platform that changed lives. Her heartbreak became her spotlight, and she never stepped out of it again. Months passed. Zanele's name had become known across the region. Her podcast was growing fast. Her face was on posters for women's events, and her voice was inspiring thousands. She had turned her heartbreak into healing. Not just for herself, but for so many others. But she never expected to see him again. Yet there he was. One afternoon, at a women's empowerment event in Kampala, someone told her that a man was waiting backstage. At first, she didn't think much of it, until she walked around the corner and saw him. Saipho, standing alone. No fancy suit, no confidence in his voice, just tired eyes and an awkward silence. He looked smaller now. Not in size, but in spirit, like life had humbled him. And it had. He looked at her with guilt and whispered, "Zanele, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Please, can we talk?" She looked at him quietly for a few seconds. Not with hate, not with love, just calm, steady peace. Then she gave him a soft smile and said only one thing, "Thank you for opening that door." She turned around and walked away, not with tears, not with anger, but with grace, because she was no longer the woman who stood broken in room 214. She was a woman reborn, a leader, a light, a voice for the voiceless. And she didn't just close the door behind her. She walked through it into a whole new world.